beginning. But we have discussed it, and we've decided that the application has been complied with as confirmed by the officers. So I don't know whether our legal gentleman would like to say something, Mr. Griffith.
It might just be appropriate just to give the reasons given for that decision. The committee were of the view that the notices substantially complied with the obligations. They took the professional guidance of the licensing officers who were satisfied that the procedure had been complied with. The coffee shop window notice can be conveniently read from the exterior of the premises as required by the requirements. It is acknowledged that more visible locations could have been used for the placing of the notices, and it cannot be confirmed whether the parish board is strictly within 50 metres. However, it does abut the highway and is visible and within the grounds of the church and hall. There was no prejudice by the fact that the notice was placed there.
Okay, so we will go to the licensing officer now, who will take us through the application. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everyone. We're here today to hear the application for a new premises licence at Newton Village Hall, Caswell Road, Newton, for St Peter's Church, Newton, Parochial Church Council, the Vicarage, Merrytwell Lane, Newton. An application for a new premises licence was received by this authority on the 8th of April 2022. The applicant has applied to allow the following licensable activities: the supply of alcohol Monday to Sunday 12 to 22:30, films Monday to Sunday 12 to 22:30, with opening hours of Monday to Sunday 9 to 2300. Copy of the application is attached at Appendix A, which is on page 6, and a plan is attached on page 30, which is Appendix A1. The hall is a large detached building standing in the grounds of St Peter's Church. There is a large sports hall and two smaller rooms that have a movable partition, so it can be used together or separately. There is off-road entrance and parking in the church, and the purpose of the application is to enable alcohol, primarily beer and wine, to be sold at private functions related to the activity of the church and its organisations. Such activities include fundraising events, concerts, refreshments after choir and after church services. The purpose, therefore, is to provide a friendly facility for people to socialise without causing nuisance or offence. Sorry. It will neither be late nor loud. A location plan is attached to Appendix B, which is page 31. The Licensing Act 2003 contains 4 licensing objectives, namely, number 1, the prevention of crime and disorder, number 2, public safety, 3, prevention of public nuisance, 4, protection of children from harm. Each of these objectives is of equal importance, and the application must demonstrate how they are to be promoted. Conditions which are consistent with the operating schedule and will be attached to the licence if granted are attached to Appendix C, page 32. Relevant representations have been received from 6 other persons. Copies of the representations are attached at Appendix D1 to D6, which is page 33 to 39. Considering this application, members should have regard to the current statement of licensing policy, which can be found at the following link contained within the report. Members should also have regard to the relevant parts of the current statutory guidance issued by the Home Secretary in April 2018. Number 1, the introduction, Chapter 1. Number 2, licensing objectives, Chapter 2. 3, applications for premises licence, Chapter 8. 4, determining applications, Chapter 9. 5, conditions attached to premises licence, Chapter 10. 6, statement of licensing policy, Chapter 14. And 7, regulated entertainment, Chapter 16. Of relevance to this application, the following paragraphs from Chapter 16 are specified below. 16.6, as a result of the regulatory changes that have amended the 2003 Act no licence is required for the following activities. Live music. No licence permission is required for a performance of unamplified live music between 8 and 2300 hours on any day on any premises. A performance of amplified live music between 0800 and 2300 hours on any day on premises authorised to sell alcohol for consumption on those premises, provided that the audience does not exceed 500. Recorded music, no licence permission is required for any playing of recorded music between 0800 and 2300 hours on any day on any premises authorised to sell alcohol for consumption on those premises, provided that the audience does not exceed 500. Licence conditions. Live music or recorded music. 16.36. Any existing licence conditions or conditions added on a determination of an application for a premises licence or a club premises certificate, which relate to live music or recorded music, remain in place, but are suspended between the hours of 0800 and 2300 hours on the same day where the following conditions are met. At the time of the music entertainment, the premises are open for the purposes of being used for the sale or supply of alcohol for consumption on the premises. If the music is amplified, it takes place before an audience of no more than 500, and the music takes place between 0800 and 2300 hours on the same day. 16.37. Whether a licence condition relates to live or recorded music will be a matter of fact in each case. In some instances, it will be obvious that a condition relates to music and will be suspended. For example, during performances of live music, all doors and windows must remain closed. In other instances, it might not be so obvious. For example, a condition stating, during performances of regulated entertainment, all doors and windows must remain closed, would be suspended insofar as it relates to music between 0800 and 2300 hours on the same day to an audience of up to 500 people. But the condition would continue to apply if there was regulated entertainment after 2300 hours. 16.38, more general licence conditions, for example, those relating to overall management of potential noise nuisance that are not specifically related to the provision of entertainment. Signage asking patrons to leave quietly will continue to have an effect. A link to the full guidance can be found at the information contained in the report. And the determination of the application. The decision must be based on the individual merits of the application and the representations received, with a view to promoting the licensing objectives outlined in paragraph 5 of the report. In arriving at the decision, members should also have regard to the relevant provisions of the policy and the guidance as previously provided. Reasons must be provided for any departures from the policy or guidance. In reaching the decision, the committee must have, in regard to the representations, take such steps mentioned below, if any, as it considers appropriate for the promotion of the licensing objectives. A, grant the licence subject to 1. Conditions that reflect the operating schedule, modified to such extent that the authority considers appropriate for promotion of the licensing objectives. Certain regulated entertainment under the Licensing Act 2003, as amended, has been deregulated. Where entertainment is deregulated but licensable activities continue to take place on any premises, any licence conditions imposed on a grant of licence in respect to any deregulated entertainment will be suspended. 2. Any mandatory conditions relevant to the licence. B. Exclude any of the licensable activities to which the application relates. C. Refuse to specify a person in the licence as the premises supervisor. D. Reject the application. In view of the representations received, the licensing subcommittee's instructions are requested. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Do you have any questions? No. Do you have any questions? No. Okay. So now we go. You'd like to explain to us more fully this time, perhaps, why exactly you're objecting, what your objections are, and what you're fearful of.
Firstly, thank you for considering the points we made about the notices not being displayed. First of all, I don't agree with the decision, but I respect the fact you at least took the trouble to look at it first and make a decision based on that. So I respect that. Thank you. Shall I read what how I've put the objection? How would you like me to do? Just read out what I've put, basically? Yeah.
Shall I assist? I mean, you can read it out exactly as it comes. Yeah. If you want to amplify on that, you can. You can't bring new objections in.
No.
But if you want to expand on what's been written, you can do so. Sure. Or if you just want to read them out as it is, it's a matter for you how you want to.
Thank you. Okay. As I said, the first concern I had was the lack of knowledge in the community, but I think you've given that your time. And I've just basically said a 7-day-a-week, day and night alcohol license would be totally against what a village hall represents. Elderly residents meeting for coffee, a book library, children's parties. They do a great job of all this. Yoga and keep fit classes, a place for locals to meet in a quiet, friendly environment. Combine this with alcohol being served and all the consequences that can bring seems totally out of keeping, out of character with a village hall in a very quiet community. We do have parking issues now. I know this isn't a highways meeting, but we do have parking issues on a busy church day with cars parked on double yellow lines quite often outside our houses, close to a very busy tight corner on Caswell Road, opposite the entrance to Nottage Road. It's something that residents are pretty good-willed about in the main because they accept that it's weddings and funerals and it's important occasions. But I think if you combine this with an all-day drinking or day-night wedding, or the extra vehicles, I think really could cause chaos. I've experienced it for so many years now, and as a community councillor, I just get so many complaints about that. And then finally, in relation to the prevention of crime and disorder and prevention of public nuisance, the noise and mess created by a drinking establishment, as you all well know, to the area, such as litter, damage, and potentially all the other things that I won't repeat what I've put there. The other things that you get on pavements and gardens will have a huge environmental and social impact on a quiet residential area where elderly and young families with small children reside. The application states neither late nor loud, so kind of why the request for a license as late as 22:30. 22:30 is late to a family with small children and late to elderly residents. In conclusion, the village hall has been of great benefit to our community. An alcohol license would no way enhance this. I got no personal issues, no personality issues. I think that the way it is now is it's well run. It's great. It's fantastic for the local community. I just don't think an alcohol license would be appropriate. Thanks for hearing that. Thank you.
Hello. This application does not share the values of our village, nor our values. It can only lessen our quality of life. Selling alcohol 10 hours a day, 365 days a year from a village hall built by donations, largely from the locals, including myself, does not represent what we want from the church. At the church's last attempt, 5 or so years ago, this was rejected. The police were there as well. They rejected it also. Strange how these respective agencies are not now objecting. Perhaps they don't know about it. Child protection, unaccompanied children in this environment where alcohol is being served. I was under the impression that was illegal. Maybe the church is just going to stop the children coming. I don't know. Maybe the relevant agencies just don't know. I've got no idea. On page 30 of your statutory licensing subcommittee, you have a map submitted by the church. It's misleading because the boundary at the bottom is owned by Dr. Julia Baker. It's a long boundary. The house is called Montrose. It's on your map. Clearly an attempt to try and lessen the real impact on residential properties by anybody looking at this map. So I've nearly finished. So going through your points here, protection of children from harm, the applicant wants to sell alcohol alongside daily children's activities. Also, planning requires a change of use, which has not been granted as far as I'm aware. And another point, we keep talking about 10:30 at night. I think that the local law is that is only allowed to stay up until 9 o'clock at night. And if it's not now, then it's been changed and we don't know about it. Prevention of crime. Where there's alcohol, there is an increase in crime. Why would we want an increase in crime? I don't understand. Public safety. Already there are parking on double yellow lines on the brow of the hill, on the bends, forcing oncoming traffic into other traffic. Public nuisance, neither late nor loud. If 2,300 hours is not late, then what is? How can you guarantee it will not be loud? You don't know who's going to come because you don't know who's going to turn up when you're selling alcohol. The trouble has already been preempted by the church in the application by saying they'll fill in a book if there's an assault or anything else. And this is what it says in there. So this isn't an environment I really want to be in where people fill in books for assaults. This is our village hall, not a commercial venture for the church to cash in at the locals' cost. It's church's gift to our village, alcohol. Thank you, Chair.
Can I assist at one point that Sir Hedges has made? It's in relation to the planning aspect. Obviously, if there's a planning covenant, etc., preventing release, opening hours, then that will bite, irrespective of the license granted. So even if a license was granted for the full time, and there is a planning covenant saying you can only open till 9. I don't know the factual things about this. You could grant a license for that period, but the premises would still only be able to open in accordance with that covenant. So it's just something that perhaps may be useful to consider at this appropriate stage. That wouldn't be something that would be considered under the licensing matters, but whatever covenants are in place would still be binding, irrespective of whatever license you were to be granted.
Do you have any questions for the gentleman? No. Any questions for the objectors?
Is it all right to stand? I'm used to standing to preach. I'm not used to using or writing a script actually, but there were so many different things I wanted to put in and I wanted to make sure it was done properly. Anyway, I am the Reverend Canon Christava, the Vicar of St. Peter's in Newton, having formerly been a curate in 2 parishes, then chaplain to the university and a lecturer here. And after that, I spent a quarter of a century in Llansamlet, Birchgrove and Gleis. For the last 5 years, I've been here as vicar in St. Peter's, and I appear here on behalf of the Parochial Church Council of the Church of St. Peter's, of which I'm the chair. And today I am the spokesman for all of the 17 of us local residents, all duly elected from a church of over 100 worshippers, for the application which we made for a premises license to enable the sale of alcohol at the church hall. As it states very clearly in the application, primarily beer and wine at private functions relating to the activity of the church and its organisations. Such activities including fundraising events, concerts and refreshments after choir practice and after church services. There is no intention whatsoever to run a pub, allowing or encouraging people to come in off the street and have a drink. There is not the intention. It's quite simply to enhance the service that's already provided for those groups that use the hall. Alcohol would not be available all the time, even between the hours of 12 and 10:30, only at those particular functions. By virtue of its status as a church and charity, we're limited and constrained by the things we're allowed to do. Running a pub would not be one of them. The Diocesan Trust of the Diocese of Swansea and Brecon, which holds the deeds, both the land and the building, would not permit this, and nor would we, the Parochial Church Council of St. Peter's Church, who are applying for the licence, want it. In particular, myself. I'm 60 years old. Hopefully, I'll soon be welcoming my own grandchildren in the vicarage, and I live next door as well. I don't want the loud and raucous public house that seemingly people are objecting to. Not, I would hasten to add, that you allow loud and raucous public houses. I'm delighted that all the statutory authorities have been consulted. They've looked at the application and they've made no representation whatsoever. They seem to be happy for the application to proceed. Applying for a premises licence is uncharted territory for us, and I'm very grateful for the help that I've been given by the licensing officers of the City Council, whom I've consulted throughout the application, as indeed one is advised to do when you visit the website to get the documents to apply for the licence. St Peter's Church was built in 1903. The church hall was officially opened on the 29th of December 1921. It's quite interesting that Oystermouth Parish Magazine says the opening of St Peter's Church Hall by Mrs. Richardson proved a most enjoyable function. The vicar presided over a large gathering and all enjoyed the excellent refreshment served by the ladies. After a dedicatory prayer, an interesting programme of speech and song followed, and they list the musical items. The following day, the children enjoyed their treat of a tea party, followed by a cinema entertainment, kindly given by Mr. Henderson. This, of course, is over 100 years ago. Therefore, there is no one in this room who was alive at the time of the hall's opening. Therefore, no one can complain that they moved into the neighbour without knowing of the existence of these large public buildings. The use of the buildings has, as you can see from that, changed little over the years, and the application for this licence reflects not a change, but a regularisation to be fully compliant with the legislation and the needs and wants and the users of the hall, and also to enable the PCC, which is a registered charity, to continue to provide the facilities that the users wish, and also to generate the income vital that we need to remain economically viable, to simply keep the hall open. As with all public buildings in Wales, the church and hall were both shut down by government order in March 2020. Consequently, there was no revenue coming into the hall for many, many months. Unlike many public buildings, which were then generously and quite properly supported by the local council and the Welsh Assembly, because the hall was church property, it received no such assistance, no income whatsoever. During that time, as the chairman of the administrative trustees, I took on responsibility for the hall, together with the officers of the PCC. The slender reserves of the hall had before COVID diminished, and it was a long time before we were allowed by law to slowly and carefully welcome some of the returning groups to use the building, and thus provide desperately needed funds. With the return of near normality, many of the clubs that use the hall for exercise have returned, although some have not, as is reflected throughout the country, where many are still wary and slow to return, if indeed they'll return at all. We continue to offer in the hall what we always have, a warm welcome in good facilities, not merely for church people, but for the village and the wider community. That indeed is why the building is called the Village Hall, a decision made when the present hall was opened on the site of the old one in 2010, because it was decided, although it was owned by the church, we wanted the building to serve the whole community. I hope this preamble has not been too long or wearisome, but I offer in the hope it puts into context the 6 objections that we have been received, and means that hopefully we can look at them fairly swiftly in order to allay any genuine concerns and also to discount the spurious ones. D1, the idea that this is not a business, but after all a village hall, hopefully is now apparent as a complete fallacy. The utility companies don't reduce their costs because it's a village or church hall. And we're most concerned, as is everyone, at what will be the soaring cost when the hall's heating and lighting go back on again in September time. They're already a significant amount and burden on us. We also have a duty of care to make sure the building's in a good state of repair, is cleaned regularly, properly insured, the fire extinguisher checked, and all the other things which I won't bore you with, but which we all know, suffice it to say, are not cheap. And they're not free, even though the church is a charity. It might be good to note that, yes, there was public donations made by church people and others, but the parish church donated £200,000 of its reserves of the hall and the very, very valuable land that the hall stands on, if you think of that piece of land and its value in Newton now, was used as well. And there has been no return whatsoever since it was built on that massive investment of a charity's money and assets. The parish church has been unthanked, is the unthanked, very generous benefactor of the community. The hall continues to run all the events detailed in Appendix D1, and we're delighted to do so. But some of those who use the hall wish us to offer them the chance to enjoy a quiet drink while they do what they've always done, or like a fellowship lunch. And maybe when they finish the entertainment or choir practice or service or concert in the church. All Saints Oystermouth, the nearest church to us down the road, that has a premises license and similarly serves alcohol properly regulated by the licensing authorities with a DPS. Since these things already take place, all these events, and are all the business of the hall and the church, this application is not going to increase the amount of cars. It's just going to provide a service which is better for those who already are taking advantage of the hall. As a licensing concern, we would obviously not wish people to drink and drive. But in today's time, with fuel as expensive as it is, and many users of the hall being rightly environmentally conscious, they'll often share lifts. And some groups, for instance, the choirs who practice with us, while the designated driver would have a soft drink or a coffee, they wish to finish their evening entertainment and practice by perhaps quietly having a glass of wine. We're not talking about people consuming gallons of alcohol. The inclusion of the application for off sales was put there because it was suggested to me that if someone had purchased a bottle of wine to share between a couple of people on a table and had not finished it, they'd be allowed to stopper it up and take it home, which would mean that either they wouldn't have to throw it away, which would be wasteful, or even worse, try and bolt it down really quickly, which again would be offensive under the licensing. Hopefully, as we move on, the section 4 of that one, the potential vomit and urine that are mentioned there and in Appendix D6, they really no longer need any comment because that's just simply not going to happen. Moving to Appendix D2, all-day drinking is not going to happen, as I said at the beginning. The reason for the breadth of the hours is surely now obvious, because different groups meet at different times. There are different requests to use the hall. Now, certainly the choirs, when they practice, and the concerts are in the evening, and very often they start either at 7 or 7:30, and so they could easily go on to 9:30. And if you then had a drink after that, before you went home, it would be after 10 o'clock. That's why I put 10:30. But events like Christmas fetes or fellowship lunches, they're during the day, usually and often on weekdays. Furthermore, we receive requests to host small receptions after funerals, where people are often asked if they're allowed to have alcohol for their guests. Now, I certainly understand after nearly 40 years in ministry that there are some families for whom the thought of going anywhere after a service is complete anathema. But for others, it's vitally important, and it's the place where they can support each other and celebrate their loved one's life. And no, you don't have to have a drink in your hand to do that, but for a lot of people, that's actually what they want to do. The purpose is certainly not to serve all day, every day, but simply to have the flexibility to meet the demands and indeed the needs, the very human needs of our community. And I suppose fundamentally, that's what irks me about so many of these objections, is that they're making out that the church is completely irresponsible and that we tolerate and indeed encourage bad and drunken behaviour. And that's hurtful and ridiculous. Moving on to the parking. Of course, all drivers should be thoughtful and considerate and observe the highway code when parking. But as stated, there is not going to be an increase in the cars being parked because of this application. They're parking there already now. Where there is a large funeral and wedding service, parking is at a premium, but that's true pretty much anywhere you go in Swansea, probably in the country. I'm sure we can continue to be good-willed in accommodating what are vitally important life events for people. Something to point out here as well for the hearing is that there are 17 parking places around the church which can and are used by the users of the hall. And very often parking becomes congested, not because of the hall, but because of the people who are going to the beaches. I'm sorry that you've had a break-in to this is the third deposition, and I understand that is indeed very upsetting, but I really don't think that this licence is going to increase the likelihood of another one. In relation to D3, most of the points have already been addressed. There was a film club for a considerable time before COVID, and we have people who are very keen to start one again. And I completely agree, this was the lady who'd seen the notice, I completely agree you do not need to have a glass of wine to watch a film. But then why shouldn't you have the option? And again, the volume of traffic will not be increased whether the people watching a film have a cup of tea or a glass of wine. The points made in D4 have really been covered. However, as indeed have many in D5, the application, however, does actually reflect the original purposes and reasons for the application since I wrote it. I'm saddened that the one person who did actually come to see me has chosen to completely ignore what I said to them. I'm not quite sure why. They must have misunderstood. And I do indeed know the hall is in a conservation area. In relation to the technical and legal errors, I would undoubtedly bow to the licensing officers but as far as I'm aware, the declaration alleged to be misleading under Schedule 11 of the Licensing Act doesn't actually apply to us. But I'm not trying to tell anyone their job. Number 4 of those technical errors. Having conducted the course for a personal license, because of the purposes of this premises license, I put myself forward and taken the necessary course to become a personal license holder in order that I will be the DPS, the point of contact there and the person who knows the law and can make sure it is properly and duly applied. And in so doing, I'm actually assuming a responsibility on behalf of myself and the church and the wider community, which simply doesn't exist at the moment. And from my studies to pass the necessary examination, the law, as it's quoted there, I'm sure is quoted incorrectly. It's the exclusive or primary purpose of the hall is not and never will be the sale of alcohol, as is, for instance, in a pub. Therefore, unaccompanied children is what it's talking about. It wouldn't be allowed in because they'd be going onto licensed premises. They would be going into that, but it's not being used as a pub. It's neither its primary nor exclusive purpose. Any child who is unaccompanied in the hall would actually be part of an organised activity. For instance, when the brownies come on a Thursday evening, and that's taking place in the main hall, and they wouldn't be exposed to alcohol, nor would they be exposed to any other adults outside that activity, which of course is compliant with the licensing regulations, keeping the children safe from harm. But it's also there because it's part of the Church in Wales' own safeguarding policy, and it would be one of the procedures that's incumbent on the PCC in running the hall, and also part of the health and safety and safeguarding policy of the brownies themselves and or any other organisation using that hall, that unaccompanied children didn't simply go off to the toilets. And in any case, it wouldn't be at the same time as that alcohol was being served. This, for instance, means that, right, there we are. If children were present at a function, say a children's party, then obviously alcohol is not going to be being sold at a children's party. If there were an event after a concert or a church service, they would be there with their family, so after a funeral. And the main purpose of the hall still then is not the sale of alcohol. It would be providing a wake, wouldn't it? In that way, the fourth of the licensing objectives were to protect children from harm is being and will be robustly upheld. Moving on, the charity's own constitution is indeed in existence, and as I said earlier, would preclude the very things happening which that deposition claims the licence is trying to achieve, namely the building being used as a public house, which hopefully is a comfort to the objectors. The use of the grounds of the hall to meet and socialise by young people during lockdown is mentioned, but that wasn't encouraged. It only took place because there was nowhere for people to go. The hall was locked and not in use, and therefore young people sought, as I'm sure we're all aware, to congregate anywhere they could until the police had to come and move them on. They weren't encouraged to be there. Hopefully that will never happen again, because hopefully, pray God, there'll never be another lockdown. As can be seen from the licensing schedule, at all exits, there will be notices asking people to leave quietly, and this will be encouraged and reinforced by the users. We are aware of noise. It is very difficult and it is a problem, but even without an alcohol license, we do have people come and complain about the noise. We actually had one of the local residents come and complain at midday during a children's party when presumably they were dancing around to Frozen or something like that, that his enjoyment beside his swimming pool was being disturbed. I really do not perceive a problem from any of the groups that would be using the hall. They're, as I say, mainly choirs or groups after services. Appendix D6 is pretty much Mr. Hodges is pretty much a carbon copy of his neighbours, and the points have already been addressed. And I hope they've been addressed to the complete satisfaction of the licensing councillors. I'm sorry I've taken up so much of your time, and I hope I have gone some way to mollifying the objectors. There is, if I may though, one objection that I would wish to deal with, and that comes in representation D2, where Peter Jones writes, I would moreover question this as a benefit to locals and assume it is merely a scheme to allow the owners to line their pockets from parties and gatherings related to the church. Now, I take particular exception to that. I'm an Oxford graduate. I'm not paid in any way commensurate with that qualification because I have a calling because of which I receive a modest stipend from the church. It's not an inconsiderable amount of money, but it's certainly not commensurate in any way with the salaries being paid to the people I trained with, I studied with in Oxford. But that's my choice. I'm not moaning. But by virtue of being a vicar, you take on the parish as you find it and hopefully move it forward for the better. I don't get paid anything more for being the vicar of a church with a hall. The hall is actually, in my own opinion, a vanity project. If I'd been the vicar in Newton when the new hall was being planned, I would never have built it in that way. It's too large for purpose. And as a consequence, the assets of the parish of which I'm the vicar are tied up. And as I said, we've had no return from over 12 years. At a time when churches, as with most charities, are financially strained to breaking point. There's a real problem. And I've tried my best, and I am trying my best to make it work. I have devoted hours, literally, since taking over a couple of years ago in lockdown, hours thereby running into days and indeed weeks of my time to running the hall for no return whatsoever, not even my expenses. And there are other members of the PCC, most particularly our treasurer, who's not paid anything either, who's devoted hours to keeping the books straight. So to be accused of lining my pockets, I find repulsive, and I completely refute it. In conclusion, the hall is only viable because there is a modest return from the users of the cafe and the exercise class. That's used to cover the bills. And because there's no longer a parish administrator employed on a regular basis, because I voluntarily do what she used to be doing, together with the treasurer and a few other volunteers. If we stop doing what we do for nothing, the hall would close. And the extra work involved in attaining a personal license, the hours spent in applying for a premises license, are my commitment to a building that I'm really not sure I believe in, but it's there and I have to make the best of it for the community. If that building can't be made viable, then I personally will be pushing as hard as possible for the church's land to be offered for planning. I'm sure some of the residents would probably be delighted to see another couple of huge houses with swimming pools on the land, but my vision would be a rather different one, following the vision of the former Archbishop John Davis, the Archbishop of Wales, encouraging the church using surplus land for affordable housing, witnessed by the 4 affordable housing bungalows that were built in my old parish of Birch Grove, between Affordable Housing Wales, Gwalia and the parish, and that was a project which I initiated before leaving there. I thank you for your time. In conclusion, well, I've said what I have to say. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks for that. My first question was going to be, what would you expect the hall to be used for? But I don't want to go back on that because you spent quite a time on that. And the other one then is, back to what the hall be used for. You told us what the hall will be used for. We thought we would nod our head saying that's good. But if people came along and wanted to do a 16-year-old, 17-year-old, 18-year-old party, would you allow that? And the second question was, which I think I know the answer, but you can say it again. Will the hall, if you get this license, would it be open to the general public? And the other one is then on 5.1. This is because you spoke so long. I read my report again, so I picked something up that I hadn't picked up before. On the licensing objectives, you've got 4 of them there, and it says each of these objectives is equal importance, and the application must demonstrate how they are to be promoted. Well, you explained 3, but on public safety, you didn't put anything in. So whether you want to put something in now, because like it said earlier on, each one of these is equal in its own rights. So I don't know if you want to add anything to that. And more than likely the legal person will mention something to that afterwards, whether we take that into consideration. That's all at the moment.
The policy with children's parties is that primary school age, really, because you just end up, I mean, you do, I can completely concur. You can end up with people at children's parties when they're of a greater age. You can run into difficulties. What they've done traditionally is said it's primary school age children. Therefore, you've got much younger children there, and there wouldn't be alcohol available at that. It just wouldn't be allowed. I can't remember, there was another point before the public safety one.
Whether it was open to the general.
The hall is open to the general public, but the individual activities wouldn't be. If a choir's rehearsing, they're not going to just welcome anyone walking in off the street and having joining them. It would be booked for the use of that choir at that time.
Yeah, what I was getting at is there somebody going to run this hall, and will the bar be open at midday, and could anybody walk in and have a pint?
No,
that's what I'm trying to get at.
No, not at all. The public safety. Well, obviously, public safety is already part of the risk assessments of the hall to try and keep people safe from harm. We have regular checks of the premises and building. If you wish to suggest something you would like me to put in there to uphold public safety, I'm quite happy to.
I might be able to assist here. I mean, public safety from the licensing objectives is not so much. It may come as a surprise to some people, but it's not so much people getting drunk and therefore putting their own lives in jeopardy. It's more to do with fire, people to evacuate buildings in a fire, maximum capacity so that people aren't overcrowded. It's that kind of public safety rather than someone walking through the grounds and a branch of a tree falling and hitting them on the head. Is that kind of public safety. Does that assist in terms of narrowing
Absolutely.
The question possibly?
By virtue of the fact that the hall is there and open and used, we have our own policies. We have a health and safety policy. They're all complied to and kept. The our insurers, the ecclesiastical insurance policy, are very keen to make sure that we keep people safe within the premises. I'm quite happy to add something under guidance as to what you would wish to that. I suppose I would say I haven't put anything because I was feeling that that's already being covered by what we do, as in many things, even before we have without a license. our responsibility to people is there anyway. I hope that's of help.
Thanks, you. On page 32,
Mhm.
the conditions that you've offered. Number 8, there's no rubbish including bottles should be moved, removed or placed in the outside areas between 11 and 8.
Yeah.
11 is very late if you live in next door. If somebody's moving bottles around, I'm just wondering.
No, I'm fine, quite happy to say that we put out before 6 o'clock in the evening.
But 9 o'clock would be
9
agreeable,
o'clock,
I'm
it's
sure
absolutely
with-
fine. I mean, yeah, yeah, that's not a problem. Not a problem.
It's just so that, you know, it's giving thought then to the neighbours as well. And of course you are one, you just said, you know. Do you have any questions?
Just one quick one, it's nothing major, but you've mentioned some of the examples of the type of events you'll be having, funerals, choir practice, etc. It would be fitting to have a wedding reception there. Is that something that you could potentially do in there?
We've spoken about the possibility of doing it, but taking something like that on is an enormous undertaking. We do have people saying we'd like to have an outside caterer come in to do a small reception or whatever. We've got a 90th birthday tomorrow. But I'm not sure we have the infrastructure to do that really. And also with closing at 10:30, I wonder whether the sort of people that they're worried about, many people do want to go to a venue where they can make as much noise as they want and do whatever they want, for which Fairy Hill and places like that are ideal. But with cutting off at 10:30, I wonder whether people would even want to have their wedding reception and not be able to dance the night away.
So that either side can ask questions. So have you got any questions that you'd like to put this?
If I could, please. Yeah.
Yes.
Firstly, thanks for the presentation, Vicar. Very thorough. Thank you. One of the councillors asked the question about being open to the public, being able to walk in off the street and buying a glass of wine or a beer. Does that mean it's never open to the general public? That's my first question. And you did allude to the fact that the village hall, the funding wasn't, obviously COVID hit, like it hit a lot of people at the time, funding. So would the idea of the alcohol license be to make money back on that? And if so, it would be an awful lot of alcohol had to be served to make a decent profit from that. And the third thing is really to ask the councillors basically, is there a possible compromise around all this where it doesn't need, is it a bit of a sledgehammer to crack a walnut? Well, we don't need an all guns blazing license up till 10:30 at night to perhaps service the intentions of the church to have choir practice, drinks after choir practice and drinks after church-related social occasions. It just seems a hugely open license. And moving on, once the good vicar has potentially moved on, or I'm not sure how it works. Forgive me, but we don't know who's going to come next and what's going to be done next. Weddings could become Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sundays. Weddings, receptions. How do we know that's not going to happen moving forward? So this is why I'm sort of making the point about the license being all encompassing. I think maybe there's a compromise there somewhere which doesn't allow that to happen. Not with the good gentleman that's there now, but maybe in the future, you know. So that's it really. That's my point. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, I do understand. As I say, I would not want to be living next door to somewhere that's serving alcohol all day long, every day at all. And the intention is not that. I don't know how you could really stipulate anything different, but I mean, it is what is said. It's to do with the functions of the church. I suppose one of the things it's actually doing, as I mentioned, is making someone accountable for what happens. At the moment, I beg to be led by the licensee. Would there be a legal objection to me having a wedding reception there? having external caterers in and saying to the people, we have no license here, but you can bring your own alcohol with you. There's no objection to that. You see, and that really is the thing. As I say, I'm putting my reputation, potentially, if I get it completely wrong and end up with 6 months imprisonment or an unlimited fine under Section E or whatever of the potential fines imposable. I'm basically trying to do things the right way. And as we know, yes, we have concerts, people want to have a drink afterwards, and perish the thought, I've seen enough people over the years and a long career going off to donations bars where have a free glass of wine, but why don't you give £3 to the charity we're supporting? That's really what I'm trying to avoid. I want to do things properly and cleanly and clearly. So no, it's not going to be a walk-in off the street. There won't be alcohol served at all times, because I don't have the infrastructure or the staff to regulate that or the desire to do it. It's there for the particular times where there is a function, and thereby so I am making myself responsible for making sure that the people serving the alcohol don't serve anyone underage and fulfill all the other responsibilities of the license, of the Licensing Act. I don't know whether there's another way of doing it, and I don't know who will come after me, but I do know that if things were being performed in a different way, and the church authorities were contacted by the licensing officers saying, where is a problem with your church hall? It's loud, raucous and noisy, and we have complaints coming. The Archdeacon of Gower and the Bishop of Swansea and Brecon would move very quickly, as indeed would the trustees of the Diocesan Trust. It wouldn't be acceptable. I don't know whether that allays comments, but I can't really do much more.
Comfy. As regards getting a license from outside, they tried this the last time. They actually tried to circumvent the law by because they couldn't get a license themselves, by getting outside caterers in. So that went down pretty poorly with the police as well. And as regards the thing about not serving people to just walk in from the street, I do believe that they're trying to sort of like have the film club or show films and stuff like that. So does that mean that it's only to invited people who are allowed to come? Because obviously, if you're going to go and see a film, unless you're going to be invited, then how do they know who's going to turn up? It's just a question. I'm just asking the question, so thank you.
Yes, I mean, a film club presumably would have a group of people and a constitution, and included in that would be the stipulations. We must be considerate to our neighbours. Similarly, with choirs, they all have their own lists of people who, if they behave badly, I'm sure would be asked to leave the choir. I really have no knowledge whatsoever. I have only been in position since just under 5 years, and there was an interregnum. There was no vicar there for nearly a year before, after Canon George Bennett retired. So I really am not sure what is being suggested about circumventing. If that was done, totally wrong. But this certainly, how is this trying to circumvent the law?
I would just like to make. Sorry. There are big doors on the back of the village hall, which at this time of year are permanently open. So it's as loud as we're talking here now. And obviously music, films, who wants to listen to James Bond at 9-10 o'clock at night? These houses that are adjoining the village hall, this is going to be as loud as we're talking now. And that's not a thing that anybody wants to live with. It's just, it's not good. And just because this gentleman says that he's not aware, doesn't mean to say it didn't happen. I was actually there in the office when the police were there, and a member of the clergy was there as well, who told me and assured me this will never happen again. And I sat in there with Mr. Derek Williams, Julia Baker's father. So I was actually there. So just because he's not aware doesn't mean it didn't happen. Thank you.
I can't give an answer to that, but I know that if the license is granted, then I will be in a position where a police officer can come and demand to see the premises license, my personal license, and whatever else they wish to see. And also, yes, the notice, the book to see if anyone's been asked to leave because of violent behaviour. But that's a licensing stipulation. It's not because we're expecting wrestling to break out anywhere. In relation to music or a film, we're not going to start showing films at 10 o'clock at night. It might be towards the end of it, and we will have due regard for neighbours. We don't want to fall out with anyone. We'll try and do the very best. But we do have to get by with living in a society where not everyone wants to go to bed at 6 o'clock, like my daughter does, because she's a personal trainer.
Can I make a suggestion? Given that Mr. Hedges is complaining with the doors being open, would there be a compromise to having doors closed after particular hours?
Certainly, yeah. What time?
maybe if you.
One thing I should point out is the doors have been open on the building for a great time, not now, but according to government guidance, because to provide ventilation against COVID. And so the doors are open, and it cost us a fortune during COVID to have the doors open all the time, even in the depths of winter, in order to ventilate and keep people safe. I'm quite happy. If you say 9 o'clock?
Maybe the committee would, in deliberations, if they feel that that's appropriate, to put in a condition regarding the doors.
Yep.
But 9 o'clock at night. 9 o'clock at night. That's not 9 o'clock at night. Who wants to listen to this? You know, he's trying to just sort of like, oh, well, we'll say 9 o'clock at night. That's not feasible. Would you really want to go outside and listen to that at 9 o'clock at night? Seriously? In your home? Nobody would. And the doors are open while he's playing films, and it's like an echo chamber at the back. And I'm not just speaking for myself. I'm speaking for other people who made representations, but they weren't accepted for whatever reason. I don't know why, but by the licence authority. For instance, the house at the end of the garden, who's, by the way, that boundary that I pointed out, which isn't the village hall boundary, it is somebody else's house. These doors lead straight onto their property. So, it's just destroying your quality of life.
We will bear in mind that neighbours are near, as you heard, I did when we spoke about the bottles and the movement of bottles, because that can be very disturbing and quite frightening if you're not expecting it. So
Thank you.
Your comments will be taken into account, I can assure you.
Thank you.
Right, okay. Well, I think we've exhausted all the avenues now. It's just up to the applicant if he'd like to say anything, just a few words in summing up.
It's very dangerous to ask a vicar to speak. As you can see, I can go on forever. You're fortunate I had a script, otherwise I still would be talking. No, I thank you very much. It's not a process I would wish to repeat, but my thanks to those who've led us through it, and to you for deliberating. We are trying to keep a village hall going for the good of everyone. We do need to try and return a profit. That was what I was going to say. There is a profit in the sale of alcohol, not huge, but say with the 2 different choirs going in, that might bring in a revenue of profit of about 40 or 50 pounds after the actual cost of the wine, which makes a big difference over the course of a year to paying the bills. That's the purpose behind it. It's not a get rich quick scheme. It's not going to run a pub. And we will do what we can, and we will obviously actively seek, if we get the licence, to remain on good terms with the neighbours, and I hope they wish to remain on good terms with us. Thank you.
It's just for me to thank everyone for turning up this morning. Thank you for your input. It has been interesting. We're going to go into recess now, and I think the officers will formally send out the decision within a few days. So it's just me to thank you and ask you to leave while we go into recess. Thank you, everyone. What's happening?
Oh, you can't see me.